Now, the city, to its credit, has programs in place to house the homeless, but I wonder if it's really addressing the issue. How do we look at this from a psychological and mental health standpoint to maybe get to the root of the problem? And Gary Dierenfeld, registered social worker out of the Dundas and GTA. Gary, do you think we should be focusing more on maybe the cause?
Yeah, we should, and particularly as it pertains to youth. The question isn't what they're running to, but more accurately, what are they running from? And we find a disproportionate number of our homeless youth are fleeing abusive situations. They won't necessarily tell you that because they've learned in their abusive situation, you don't trust grown-ups. So it makes them a hard population to serve because they're out of the home because of abuse, yet they're not necessarily going to trust those who truly can be helpful to them. And that creates quite a dilemma.
Yeah, I knew someone that was homeless in their teens, and a lot of what they told me about, they blame their parents for, in essence, allowing them to become homeless. In other words, not stepping in and stopping them. So how much of it is maybe a cry for help from a parent or a child to their parents?
Yeah, I don't know about this cry for help stuff, but even if not a cry for help, and you're fleeing parents whose their ability to manage you is marginal, maybe you're not really wanting to leave home, but you need your parents to take control, so to speak, but in a more benign, loving way than what they may have done. So many youth in leaving home are not looking really to leave home. Some of them are looking to be rescued by their parents, but their parents don't necessarily have the wherewithal, the skills to cause their kids to feel safe, loved, and comforted as much as they actually do love their kids.
So maybe it is more of an education of the parents than it is the youth that are at risk.
So I believe that very much. So when parents phone me for counseling about their troubled teen, really they're asking me to meet alone with their teen. They may be hoping that I will, quote, talk some sense into the teen. I got to tell you, Anthony, I will never meet with a child, particularly a teenager, in advance of meeting with the parents. Because more often than not, what I really have to do is help those parents engage the skills to help maintain and restore the relationship with their youth. The degree to which I can help the parents re-engage with their own youth, some of the problems just evaporate. So really, we need to do a better job on parent education.
Speaking with Gary Dierenfeld, registered social worker in Dundas. You can get a hold of him. You can see some of his credentials on yoursocialworker. Is it .ca or .com?
.com. And, you don't need to come to see me as a private social worker. Still go to my website because it's loaded with articles about family life and managing behavior.
In the study that the city did, why do you think the numbers are so high among males? It's 72% that were surveyed cited homelessness. Why such
Well,
the
in
gender
many ways,
gap?
let's think about it. It's kind of easier to leave home as a male. You're going to be less vulnerable sexually. That is not to say whatsoever that some of these males aren't vulnerable sexually and that they haven't been abused sexually. But as a young female, those risks are even greater. And, when a young female leaves the home for the streets, some of the first folks to shall I say, adopt them are actually pimps. Mm-hmm. They will try to nurture a relationship to the young girl that feels safe, but it's only for the purposes of further exploitation. So the streets are a much more dangerous place for a girl than a boy statistically, even though it's not to say that boys aren't subject to some of the very same dangers.
Which has to be intimidating if you're a young girl and on the streets. For you to enter a shelter, let's say, and you look inside and it's all men, I mean, that might cause you to turn around and go the other way and seek just alternatives.
Yeah, but having said that, most of our adult and or youth shelters do a very good job at keeping people quite safe on the premises and segregating, because they certainly recognize that that could be a situation ripe for all sorts of harm. Having said that, though, the youth, they don't know what they're in store for. And again, without knowledge of how services are provided and what services are available, it really makes it harder for them to avail themselves of what is out there.
So homelessness among Aboriginals, it's quite literally an epidemic in Canada. I mean, Aboriginals in Canada make up just 4% of the population, but the last study I saw had 90% of the homeless in Canada being of Aboriginal descent. I mean, is it a mental health issue? Is this deeper? Are we not really getting to the cause of this rather than, if we're going to find a solution, how do we find the cause?
So we're on the heels of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report. That report has helped us to understand how we've hurt our Indigenous people on reserves and also through the residential school system. So this is a whole class of persons who have been inadvertently, not necessarily inadvertently, persecuted, been tried to be erased, had their culture almost decimated. And so they have lived with the term is cultural shame. We shame them and their culture. And we've destroyed their families. So the supports that would be in place for Aboriginal persons, intact families, healthy, psychologically intact persons, we've decimated all of that. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report recognizes that we have to do a much better job at all sorts of levels at restoring the value of the person, the health of the person, the health of the family, the health of their community. That is what's needed to attack the homelessness problems amongst the Aboriginal, including just reasonable housing as well. It's a very complex problem. It's a problem that will take another generation. And I'm very optimistic now, particularly with the Liberal federal government, that maybe finally we'll start to see the appropriate trickle down to restoring an appropriate relationship with our Aboriginal peoples.
And there's a trust issue as well, too, because you hear a lot of people say, well, they don't want our help, so, why should we help?
Well, I don't know who's saying they don't want our help. They want our help. They don't want our paternalism. So there's certain ways you can deliver help. One is kind of top down, and the other is respecting who they are and providing help in a way that's structured by them for them, our First Nations communities. So as we listen better, then we're more in tune to provide those kinds of supports that truly will make a difference in their lives.
All right. I think you've said it all. I think we're covered. So yoursocialworker.com for more on Gary Dierenfeld and a lot of reading material. Gary, as always, very much appreciated.
Okay, take care.